The downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, Hromadski's exclusive interview on the Ukrainian side of the investigation. Ukrainian journalist Stanislav Aseev goes missing in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, what we know about his disappearance. Why did U.S. President Donald Trump claim that Ukraine tried to sabotage the American elections? Is there potential for dialogue in the war in Donbas? We speak to a conflict resolution expert. And farming on the front line, an inside look at the so-called bread ceasefire during harvest season in the east of Ukraine.
Has there been any progress on MH17 case in the last 3 years? What are the biggest problems?
As you know, we signed a bilateral agreement on the transfer of jurisdiction to bring justice to those responsible for the aircraft's crash. Of course, the agreement is a compromise that everyone had to agree to, given that the UN Security Council resolution on the creation of a separate tribunal did not pass. We found the most balanced formula for achieving justice. It takes time to ratify the agreement. It is linked to human rights and different principles of justice. Furthermore, the investigation is not yet complete. I don't think we should expect quick results. Everyone remembers the Lockerbie case, about the plane that exploded in 1988. Everyone remembers how long it lasted. Within a year of the plane crash, our ambassador took part in the opening ceremony of a memorial in the Netherlands, along with the relatives of the dead. Of course, they are waiting. They want to see the perpetrators. They hope that the investigation will reach the top and that all of those who took part in it will be punished, not just those who pressed the buttons. The relatives would also really like to see the location of the tragedy, and right now it's located in uncontrolled Ukrainian territory. We are in a situation where we would really like to help, but regardless of all the defense risks, we still to this day cannot do this. In addition, the investigation has been going on for so long because this is a process in which the investigators need to not only become familiar with the wreckage, but also listen to a lot of negotiations and study all the communications that happened at that time. To get the commanders, we still need to do a lot of work.
What else is needed in order to find out about the commanders, for example? The official investigation already named a figure of around 100 suspects, both Russian and Ukrainian citizens, who fought in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic at the time and who could have been involved in the assault. We also know the results of the Bellingcat investigation, in which they found the commander Hmury and also discovered where he lives.
This is a criminal investigation. The courts will have to take evidence from all the expert examinations. They don't just need to draw the whole picture, as Bellingcat does. They need to have an expert examination of all the voices and confirm who they belong to. They have to investigate the people who are at the scene. It's not only necessary to question them, but also to convince them to testify in the trial. They need to build an investigation and bring it to its logical conclusion. The Netherlands Public Prosecution Service is very thorough. At each stage, they have to be convinced that the court is considering the entire evidence base that they have.
Is there something that the investigation needs from the Ukrainian side?
The investigative group is constantly working with Ukraine's security service, but it seems to me that they need to look at the case more complexly. Not just the moment of the Boeing's crash, not just how the Buk missile was launched from Ukrainian territory, but in general, what happened on the ground and who participated in the transportation of Buk A. Now everyone is working not only to study the footage and analyze the voices. In fact, they're carrying out a sequential analysis of the events. In addition, they're attracting witnesses via video calling and adding actual suspects. It's a fairly new process. The Dutch were worried about a conviction in absentia, because we can't hand over our citizens. We can only transfer them for the duration of the trial or provide video communication. This will be a challenge for both the Ukrainian and Dutch judiciary.
Does the Netherlands generally practice trial in absentia? Moreover, we're talking about citizens of other countries.
They are making changes in the legislation. That's why negotiations for an agreement took so long. To make this possible, along with the submission of the ratification of this agreement, they will file for the changes in their criminal and criminal procedural codes. The agreement states that it will be Dutch law and the decision will be up to the Dutch court.
You said that the relatives want to see the side of the tragedy. Is Russia ready to assist in ensuring their security as the country that exercises actual control over this territory?
This is a complex question because all of this is Ukrainian territory that is currently uncontrolled. The question is whether we can guarantee the safety of the relatives. According to international agreements, we provide a special mission access to the site of the tragedy, but access occurs with the involvement of the OSCE mission. We will talk to the OSCE about whether they're ready to provide an opportunity for relatives to visit this territory, but proceeding from an exacerbation of the situation in Donbas, this is highly doubtful.
For example, Russia, as it turns out, had practically completely closed airspace over Rostov around half a day before the plane was shut down. But despite the ban on flights, Rostov continued to accept planes.
This was already known in the autumn of 2015 when the report from the Netherlands Transport Safety Council was made public. All of this is in the technical report, but no one paid any attention to it. The majority are concentrated on whether Ukraine is somehow at fault. Russia did not provide any information. There was a lot of speculation around this. For example, allegedly, Ukraine did not provide radar data for a long time. This is Russian speculation, which is also indicated in the report. Speculation also appeared in the discussion about closing Ukraine's airspace. There are no standards that would oblige us to close airspace. We have no complaints.
Earlier, you spoke about the possibility of establishing a hybrid tribunal because Russia did not support the UN Security Council decision to form an international tribunal. Is it now a matter of just convicting the perpetrators in absentia?
The hybrid tribunal was abandoned as the most costly method. The creation of a separate court is a compromise solution. Indeed, conviction in absentia appears to be the only option, although while the investigation is underway, the trial will take place. Perhaps something will change in the UN Security Council. We hope for the best.
Stanislav Aseev disappeared in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic on June 2nd. Aseev is a Ukrainian journalist from Donetsk who secretly wrote exposés on the realities of life in the DPR. He wrote under the pseudonym Stanislav Aseev. On July 12th, friends got word that Aseev was in DPR police custody. Aseev has been accused of espionage, which under DPR law carries a 12 to 14-year sentence.
How did you meet Stanislav Aseev, and what kind of person is he?
We studied together at university, and it turned out that, well, I graduated from the law department, but for the first 2 years I studied in the philosophy department at Donetsk National Technical University. As a matter of fact, we got to know each other. For 2 years we studied side by side, but then I went to study in the law department and he carried on in the philosophy department. We just kept in touch. We met up, talked to each other. Moreover, when he went to Kyiv, actually when he was in Donetsk and I was in Kyiv, Stas came over and I helped him set up contacts with the media. He had already written for leading publications, Ukrainska Pravda, Zerkal Nedeli, Radio Free Europe, and so on. That's just how we got to know each other. But with regards to what he was like as a person, I had known Stas for over 10 years, and to a certain extent he was a very particular person. As I already said, he graduated in philosophy, and it was a kind of lifestyle for him. He was quite private, and to a certain extent he was even a loner. But nevertheless, he was one of the best students, if not the best in our group. The teachers themselves recognized that. He was a person who in the 11th grade at school read classical German philosophy. He read the original versions of Kant, Hegel. In the first year he argued with the teachers, and I would say that some of the younger teachers were afraid of him. He had a command of that kind of knowledge. He was very competent. Therefore, the professors, the doctors of science, they realized he was a very good student and they wanted him to stay on at the university. But he didn't go down the academic route. He didn't go back to university because I know after university he worked in a variety of professions, if you could call it that. He worked as a grave digger, a truck loader, anything, whatever life threw at him. In 2014 and 2015 he started to write articles and he felt that journalism was his mission.
What is interesting or unique about his journalism?
Following that, it should be said that he wasn't a journalist in the classical sense. He didn't work at a newspaper or television. First and foremost, he is a writer. He wanted to write well and write about important things. And if I'm not mistaken, already by the 3rd year of the university, he had published his first collection of stories, which was completely artistic. It had nothing to do with journalism. Then, in 2013, he was even published in a string of literary publications. Already by 2015, he started to write for leading Ukrainian media. That's how it happened. You surely understand that in Donetsk it is a difficult working environment for journalists because it's very hard to practice objective journalism. For example, if a journalist comes from the United States, from Britain, or from Kyiv, in Donetsk they will never be able to write as well as the locals. And Stas was completely local. He grew up and was born in Makiivka in Donetsk. He understood it well. He was good at writing texts. He started to write about the events that were happening there, his experiences, emotions, thoughts, and he published them on Facebook. Journalists from Kyiv started to get in touch with him on Facebook and invited him to write for their publications. In this way, he started to write. In fact, his work was unique insofar as no one else got the same feel for it. When someone is directly there and has the courage to stay there, directly in Donetsk, writing about what is going on there is no comparison, in fact. He stayed there for a few years, and that's how he got into journalism. Of course, everyone who knew him told him, we warned him, Stas, this won't end well. It's okay if you stop this. Sooner or later they'll find out your real name. Stas Vasin was his pseudonym, but his real name was Stanislav Aseev. He understood that, but he considered it his mission, his duty to stay in that territory and describe the events that were happening there.
Could you tell us about his circumstances of his disappearance and how you found out about it?
On June 3rd, his mother called me. I have known his mother for more than 10 years, but she has never called me. When she called and asked whether I knew where Stas was, I knew that something wasn't right. I knew for certain that things had come to something close to arrest, because of how his mother felt. He was supposed to call his mother. They were supposed to meet the next day at 2 o'clock. He didn't turn up and his phone was switched off. Stas lived in Donetsk and his mother was in Makiivka. His phone was switched off and his mother was ringing everyone she knew. And so she rang me. I obviously spoke to his mother and rang all the people that knew Stas. It wasn't a very long list of people, literally about 7 people. People from our group, people he had kept in contact with, and no one knew where he was. We knew full well that Stas was a committed person. If he told his mother that he would meet her at 2, then he would meet her at 2. Or he would have called or found a way to get in contact. But he didn't get in contact. We started to search through his sources. As well, he used Facebook, so I wrote him on Facebook, Stas, where are you? Your mother is looking for you. And the next day, on his account, he replied, as though nothing had happened, hi, I was feeling a bit ill. So we started writing to each other. I know Stas well. It became clear, and I knew it wasn't Stas. He doesn't talk like that. If someone writes to you saying your mother is in tears, she's looking for you, she's even gotten in touch with the so-called police, and he says that it's nothing, he was just feeling a bit ill, well, it wouldn't be like that, because they have taken over his Facebook account. Straight away we posted on Facebook so that everyone, his close circle, his friends on Facebook knew that it wasn't his account, because he wasn't just talking to me, but with everyone. Moreover, while he was under arrest, there had been a few posts on his Facebook and people thought it was him. Basically, our plan worked, so everyone knew about it, that Stas was being detained. That's how I found out about the fact he was in confinement. Our internal sources, because we're from Donetsk and we lived there our whole lives the last 25 years and we had a lot of genuine contacts, these unofficial sources confirmed that he was there. But literally at the end of August, there was an official document from the so-called DPR and its authorities stating that Stas was definitely being detained there. This document, if I'm not mistaken, was posted on Facebook by Irina Herashenko saying that Stas was with them and that he was accused of espionage, again in quotes, and they could sentence him to 12 or 14 years in prison. Also, his mother met with him. I understand that the meeting took place in the Ministry of State Security building. Stas looked completely calm, physically healthy. Stas reassured his mother that everything was okay. He understood that his only hope is for an exchange, because you can't count on a fair trial there. From our sources, from the official documents, from the meeting with his mother, we can clearly state that he is there. Moreover, all the international organizations, the UN, the OSCE, and human rights organizations confirm that Stas, as a journalist, is in the so-called Security Services Office of the DPR.
Aseev is not hopeful for a fair trial in the so-called DPR, so what efforts are being made to free him? And if you hope that he will be set free, how will this come about?
I think that it's not just Stas Aseev. We probably all know that we can't hope for a fair trial there. There has already been a number of examples where they've sentenced people who have never committed espionage, but they've received prison sentences in order to intimidate the population. Therefore, the only 2 possible options for Stas to return to Ukrainian territory are international pressure from the OSCE, the UN Special Mission, on this issue, to know that Stas is being held in reasonable conditions. The other option is the Minsk process, which is a hostage exchange, when the Ukrainian side, together with the so-called DPR, can exchange hostages. There is practically no other way. It's 99% certain that the only way Stas could be released to Ukrainian territory is through the Minsk process and an exchange of hostages. Tell us a bit about the circumstances of his disappearance, if you can.
According to his mother, according to his family, the last time, as I said, when he contacted his family, it was 2nd of July, when he informed them that he is gonna come. And then he never showed up. His family, his mother came to his flat, the one that he rented in Donetsk, and was waiting for him for quite a long time, for late evening. He never showed up again. So next day she came with landlord. They opened the door and they discovered that the flat was searched, presumably by so-called MGB, Ministry of State Security. Mm-hmm. And there's also one room that was locked because it belonged to the landlord, and this room was also opened at search as well. Stanislav was gone, and no one knew where he was. After that, his mother went to local authorities, to so-called local authorities, to so-called Ministry of Security of so-called republics. She was looking everywhere, but no one actually admitted that he was there. After that, the information of his disappearance became wide known. Soon it was also known that his real name, because he was writing about life in Donetsk under pseudonym, and for a certain period of time we knew that this person by his pseudonym, and after some time it was discovered his real last name. So after that, his mother didn't leave her hope to find him. She contacted many international organizations like United Nations and OSCE and others. They were also putting all effort to press so-called authorities to make them tell where Aseev was. But so-called authorities said that we don't have him, we don't know where he was. Amnesty International, as well as Human Rights Watch, at some point received an information from, basically his mother received information from anonymous source, saying that it was 8th of July, and the source said that Aseev is at MGB, that he has been detained. That wasn't reliable information at that point, but at least that was something. And we know that there is we've been researching the situation in so-called republics for some time already, and we know that there is kind of a pattern of people being disappeared and kind of detained by so-called MGB. When you get, when a person gets arrested, then held incommunicado for weeks or even months. Incommunicado means that this person does not have any access to outer world, to lawyers, to doctors, and to families as well. And then after this period and during this period, so-called authorities deny that they have this person. But at some point, they say that this person is kind of persecuted. Of course, we cannot say this process as persecution in legal terms, because these republics, they are not state authorities. So they don't have this legal system of persecution. But that's the way they call it. After that, around 16th of July, it became public that so-called MGB actually, they admitted that they have him. They said that he is arrested for being accused in espionage. And they said that it's based on the fact that he was writing in Donetsk using his pseudonym. And as a journalist, he did write that, but according to international law and according to all legal norms, he had right to do so, of course. And the dangerous thing here is that if you read the document that's called Criminal Codex of so-called Republic, Donetsk Republic, it says that a person gets up to 20 years in prison for espionage, and if this happened during wartime, it can be even so-called death penalty. And they use a term death penalty, but it's important to stress that death penalty is a legal term that can be used only by state authorities. So Amnesty International opposes death penalty in any cases, but in this particular case, since so-called Donetsk Republic is not a state, it's self-proclaimed structure, the thing that might happen is called summary killing. So basically, there is some risk that he can be just killed. And this is a war crime. So the situation is quite difficult, and we are really looking after the way it's being developed.
Do you see any path by which Aseev could be freed?
The only way we see it at this point is some international pressure on that, and also pressure on Minsk process. We've been trying, and we are not the only organization that's doing this, but we are one among many others, to raise this issue in any kind of international talks, in any kind of international activity. So public would know about the situation, and politicians would know about the situation, because it's very significant. He's a journalist. He's a journalist doing his job in Donetsk, which is his native city, apart from other things. And he can be actually somewhere killed in this territory, or detained for many years, and he will probably be held in terrible conditions on this territory. Of course, we are not part of these negotiations, but at least we can provide the information and remind constantly about that. We have also issued so-called urgent action. That's an activity of Amnesty International when a person is in danger and some support from international community is needed urgently. We make kind of a letter with addresses of people that can influence them. In this case, these were so-called officials of these republics, of the Donetsk Republic, so-called, demanding to release him. And people from all over the world can write the letters, can sign the petitions. In this way, these de facto authorities can actually feel some sort of pressure and can feel that international community is watching.
Well, I saw this announcement that Amnesty International made, and I wanted to ask you specifically about that. Do you think that kind of pressure, that those kind of petitions, letters to the so-called authorities of the Donetsk People's Republic, can help and improve Aseev's situation?
These petitions by themselves cannot change the situation much. I mean, that's only a document, yeah. But it's only one of the activities that's been doing by only one of the organizations. There are many other activities, there are many other organizations. And what the value of this particular activity is that it involves just regular people from different countries. So basically when de facto authorities sitting somewhere thinking that no one knows what they do, start to receive letters from people from distant countries, from Ukraine, from Russia, from many European and not only European countries, they start to realize that actually the world is watching. And even they pretend they don't care, but they exist not in vacuum. They still will feel this pressure, and they will at least know that this case is being famous and that people know about that.
On July 25th, U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted that Ukraine intervened in the U.S. elections last year in favor of Hillary Clinton. Franklin Foer is a journalist at The Atlantic who investigated Paul Manafort, Trump's 2016 campaign manager. Manafort is currently being investigated in a probe into Russian interference in the presidential elections.
writing about Manafort for The Atlantic, you know, following the story. And we've just got the news about the American President Trump writing on his Twitter about the Ukrainian sabotage on the US elections. You know, we are following the story, so of course it's connected about the fact that some kind of Ukrainian politicians were digging into Manafort's story, which was helpful for Hillary Clinton. But really, can you explain to us how big this story could be? What is really could be an evidence how serious is this story? Because we kind of understand that it's a counter-argument over the Russian meddling.
Exactly. Every time Trump faces an accusation, he tries to find a counter-accusation. You say Trump is corrupt? Well, there's crooked Hillary, and she's just as bad, or if not worse. And so that's what he's faced the worst week of his presidency, where it seems like his son has been caught almost red-handed about collaborating with the Russians. And so he's never been more desperate to find a new narrative, a new storyline. And so he's looking for whatever he can find. So he points to Ukraine. Well, you say Russia interfered? Well, Ukraine interfered. Everybody interferes, and this is what happens, and I'm being unfairly targeted as the victim. So politically, it's very important for Trump to find something that he can, and it'll catch on. It's going to become an important part of the narrative. Fox News, Breitbart, the American right is going to just build and build this story. And so it might be a little uncomfortable for Ukraine now, but it's going to get worse because Trump doesn't let go of a storyline.
And what do we know about this Ukraine meddling? What is the ground? I mean, I have the 3 stories about the Alexandra Chalupa, who used to work for Hillary Clinton campaign, with an American citizen with the Ukrainian roots. There was a talks about she was talking to the Ukrainian ambassador. There was a Ukrainian MP giving the information about Manafort. But really, you look at that because you're on the story. You kind of know what we can really confirm. What was really the Ukrainian role in that?
Almost nothing. I mean, it is nothing to say the Ukrainian role. You have a couple of actors who are disconnected, who aren't part of a master plan to subvert American democracy. You have people who were freelancing, who were working on their own because they wanted to see Donald Trump lose or wanted to see Hillary Clinton win, or they had information that looked like it was going to be newsworthy and relevant. But it wasn't a conspiracy that started at the seat of Ukrainian power to try to affect the election. It's a bunch of scattered pieces of evidence that don't connect into an important narrative. It's hardly anything like what the Russians tried to do to the American election, where every single part of the American intelligence community has concluded that Vladimir Putin himself directed an effort to try to influence the election, to elect Donald Trump, and to sow paranoia and chaos in American democracy.
If you look at the bits and pieces of the story about the Ukrainian interference, it's more or less all even those pieces of evidence said that the Ukrainians, some politicians, some officials, some people connected to the Ukrainian community said that the Manafort used to work for the Ukrainian dictator, who is partly responsible for the massacre here.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's the complaint. It's that the Ukrainians were supposedly spreading opposition research, negative information about Paul Manafort, which is, I think, first of all, it's a legitimate story. It's an important story because Paul Manafort helped install a dictator in this country, helped promote him, helped polish his image. And that's an objectively very important and good story. Then if you add the information that we've learned over the course of the last year about all the illicit, illegal money that he received and that he was laundering, that itself is an important story. And so I don't really understand what the accusation that Donald Trump is trying to make. He's saying that the story about Paul Manafort is illegitimate because a couple Ukrainians were talking about it. It doesn't make any sense. But it's not important for Donald Trump's story to make sense. What's important for him is to have anything that he can say that tries to change the subject.
Why do you think today? Why do you think these days?
Because Trump is desperate, and Manafort is testifying this week before the Senate to try to say everything that he knows about this meeting that happened in Trump Tower. The meeting with a Russian real estate lawyer and with this music producer that was trying to lobby them about the Magnitsky Act. And so Trump needs anything that he can get. And right now he's running out of defenses. And so where does he turn? He turns to the one place where he seems to have some little bit of traction, which is this conspiracy that he's created about Ukraine.
What do we really know about this story about Jared Kushner, about son-in-law, Trump's son-in-law? And
right, so we don't know. I mean, this is one of the things that's really annoying about this scandal and this story is that it's about a year. There's a year we've been talking about Trump, we've been talking about Russia, we've been talking about Manafort, we've been talking about Ukraine. And we keep getting fresh pieces of evidence that make it seem like there's something terrible that happened. But we don't know exactly what that terrible thing is. And so we learned about this meeting that I just discussed in Trump Tower. And it's the first time that we have something concrete where you have Russians who are connected to the government who show up saying that they have evidence that Hillary Clinton did something wrong. And the Trump people accept the meeting. Now, it doesn't seem like anything came of that meeting, and we don't know why they were so eager to take that meeting, but all the tangible evidence, all the concrete pieces of evidence finally suggest that the Trump campaign was open about wanting to work with the Russians to discredit Hillary.
And Berlin, you know, it's still, especially when you're not in the States, there are new and new details. There is again some kind of another allegation, Comey, then Jared Kushner, and somebody else, and another gossip about, you know, Tillerson being fed up with Trump, and, you know, the gossips on the reputable media. How serious is that? Can this really, the Russian relations, all this evidence can bring us really for something big? Because in the end, you kind of try to lose, you are losing the feeling, how important are all these, you know, Jared Kushner.
Donald Trump is unlike anything else in American history. And so Democrats want to see him removed from office. They're desperate. You never have a situation like this where the opposing party is so desperate to see the other guy leave office. And you have this story that exists that it just keeps getting worse and worse. We don't know what's there in the middle. We don't know what the actual substance of the story is, but we know it looks terrible. Trump acts like he's guilty. And so they say it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. And Donald Trump and everybody around him keeps covering up. They keep lying, they keep making mistakes, they keep giving fresh energy to an investigation. And Democrats are going to continue because they keep getting so much traction with it. And it's not like people care. If you look at the broad population, they don't like Donald Trump, especially because they think that he's a clown. They think that he tweets too much. They think that he hasn't done anything in the first couple months of office, which is all true. They don't care about the Russia scandal. They're not going to care about whatever he says about Ukraine. It all seems like, but we're talking about a legal procedure in the end. The Democrats want Trump to be removed by office through impeachment. And so they need to bring charges against him. They need to show that he's committed a crime. And even if Donald Trump didn't commit a crime at some point in his life, he's going to have made mistakes here that will mean that he was committed perjury, that he fired people in possibly illegal sorts of ways, and it's too irresistible for the Democrats, and he may have broken the law.
And since we are here in Kyiv, in Ukraine, it's where Paul Manafort spent years. The question would be, why this story is significant? Why why still Manafort story matters, as he was fired.
Right. Well, I think part of it has to do with we don't know what's the middle of the scandal and what it's really about. And you look and you say, okay, the Russians tried to interfere in the American election. We know this is as close to fact now. We know that Paul Manafort worked for a pro-Russian dictator. We know that he worked for oligarchs close to Vladimir Putin. And so if you're trying to complete the narrative to figure out, it's very natural to turn to Paul Manafort and say that he's there in the center of the narrative. We don't know that he was in the center of the narrative. We don't know what his role was. Maybe it's just a coincidence that you have this guy who has all sorts of ties back to the Kremlin, who was working in the middle of a campaign that was supported by the Kremlin. Maybe it's just coincidence, but it's very, very suspicious looking. And that's why journalists keep coming back to this story. But I would argue that even if Paul Manafort had nothing to do with collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign, he's still a very significant villain in American history, because he came to Kyiv, he helped promote a dictatorship, he stole money that came from the Ukrainian people. And so if this is an opportunity to pay attention to that story that Americans usually don't care about, then that's an important thing too.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for clarification.
The first question about Ukrainian conflict, our government, many experts, psychologists say that our conflict it's not the conflict that in another country was, and we are like special in this. It's not ethnical conflict. It's not like was in between Albanian and Serbian people. What can you advise in this situation for us?
This is what we call a conflict pride or conflict vanity. Wherever you go, people say we have a specific conflict and it's unique. You know, they're in some strange way they're almost proud on the specifics of their conflict, and partly they're true, because every conflict is unique in terms of you know, different situations on the field, different kind of players. But there are some overall elements in every conflict that are the same.
You will have trainings here in Ukraine, I know in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, and in Donbas region, in Kramatorsk. For what people it will be, and if Ukrainian government want to hear about how to build dialogue, because to build dialogue, it's not very popular issue now in Ukraine, because everybody is saying, also people from government, that it's not the good time to build dialogue, because we have like hot spot, you know, in the Donbas area now.
That's also not something that I've heard for the first time. You know, people saying it's not time to talk. When then is the time to talk?
Every day, 25,000 people who cross the line, the contact line between occupation territory and territory which are controlled by Ukrainian government and Ukrainian army. But for other hand, for example, Ukrainian government say, with whom we can speak if we say that these people who say that they are like government in this territory which are occupied, they are just like terrorists and yes, and rebels, you know, and but they say that they are government, and people who cross. Also, that people that cross the contact line, they also think, some of them, that they are government, but Ukrainian government don't think that they are government. But with whom we can speak?
There are many ways how I can answer to this question. First of all, I think that people crossing over and having conversation is a good asset. And I don't mean to criticize anybody. Or
one person not think, but do some wrong things, you know, like people who are fighting with guns against Ukraine, but at Ukrainian territory, you know, and governments say we can't speak with terrorists. Nobody speaks with terrorists, but we have the situation when someone should speak with someone because nothing will happen.
Dialogue is not a replacement for legal issues. You know, so if somebody made a war crime, he made a war crime, or she. It's you cannot just say, okay, let's have a dialogue and forget about what happened. But it is also possible to have dialogue with the community, but also to take out from the community people who actually did some bad things during the war and prosecute them in a way that legal system prosecutes them. I don't think that any community in the world could benefit from hiding their own war criminals, which happens sometimes. People say, oh, he's a national hero. You're not going to prosecute him, he's a national hero. No, they're not. They're war criminals and they should be prosecuted. But it doesn't mean that that it should abolish dialogue between communities, because not everybody on any sides are war criminals. I mean, most of the people living in both East or West Ukraine, or in West Coast, or in Kosovo, in Bosnia, in Rwanda, in Azerbaijan, and Armenia, most of the people on both sides are simply victims.
What you think can help with this building dialogues? Because, for example, we have the situation when Ukrainian government don't pay pensions for people who live on the occupation territory on Donbas area, but they are still Ukrainian citizens who should. I agree, but you know, we have this so-called party of war and party of peace. And the president, for example, was in party of peace, but now he wants to go to the party of war, you know, and because the election is come, you know, the president election, and many people in society think that we should like just fight for this territory and not like try to some dialogues initiative.
That's a problem for itself, you know. That we didn't even have time to speak about it. The life goes on, you know. Yes. So you have this conflict that lasts for years, but the life goes on. You have elections, you have media that wants clicks, that wants you know, the curriculum and all this kind of stuff. So they use this conflict for this kind of second-rated purposes, because. I'm sorry, the conflict is a first-rate priority in Ukraine, the way I see it. I mean, it has to be resolved because it is, in philosophy, they call it meta-political issue. It's beyond politics, you know, to organize the state in a proper way. And who cares about the elections, whether this party or that party is going to win? This is the most important thing. But you have these people using the conflict in their everyday professional or political work. And it just fuels in. It just adds fuel on fire, and it makes conflict even more difficult to solve, because politicians very often think that that if they can forget very soon what they were talking before the elections, during the election period, that everybody else will forget. But it doesn't happen that way. If you overdo it, you will end up with a frozen conflict. I believe that Crimea already has all major elements of the frozen conflict. A frozen conflict is the conflict that doesn't move. It will sit there, and it will sit there, and it will bug us, and it will bother us for decades and decades. And that's what happens when you overuse, when you overdo use of conflict in a wrong way. I see the importance because I've been there in many conflicts, and I spoke with people, and I can tell you most of the people everywhere. They don't want this. They don't want this life, which I understand perfectly, because we have this one life, and what we do in this life, that's it. You know, so you don't want to sit in some Donbas region and be in a conflict surrounding for 30 years, listening to the bombs flying over. I mean, and live this life, because people kind of adjust. You know, they have a conflict, but they kind of continue to live, you know, to live their life, but it's life under stress, under anguish, and all this kind of stuff. Nobody wants that.
Before the war, farmer Vadim Kapler had 10,000 hectares of land. Since 2014, the demarcation line has run through his fields. Half of the land is now part of the self-proclaimed DPR. In the fields that remain in the territory controlled by Ukraine, he tries to continue to farm, despite the shelling and vicinity of the military positions.
Over there on the right, those cooling towers, that's already the DPR. That's a bit further. Ours is closer to here, and the shooting is a bit quieter. Sometimes they compromise. At certain times it's impossible to negotiate. That's how we live. There's probably no other way. After all, they are armed soldiers.
In the fields, there are fires caused by the shelling. That's an additional loss. Even the military isn't allowed to go wherever it wants, despite the fact that the land is only rented by farmers, because the military positions cannot be made obvious.
Of course, there are times when it's inconvenient for us, but it's nothing, nonsense. We fix it all. The main thing is that there are toys and potatoes over there, and it's darkness. Not long ago we went to the fields to have a look. Close to over there, you get up on that hill, and from there you can see everything. They drove up, stood and looked, planned to leave, and they were going to run us over.
The Dynasty farm is across the road from the sunflower field. It is fenced off by 3 rows of anti-tank mines.
Well, they blocked access to our fields with concrete blocks and barbed wire. You can't go there. You can't really do anything. There are mines straight ahead. Here's the road. We leave via the road. And the roadside here, you can't place a foot on it.
This is the road where the combine harvesters and tractors were blown up whilst leaving to go and work in the fields. This has happened 3 times at Dynasty. The last time was in 2015.
Well, here is the combine harvester. We can't repair it. It stands there as a symbol. The frame is all bent. It's all rubbish. It was blown up by an anti-tank mine 2 kilometers from here.
The driver survived. He had a concussion. Vadim says that he hasn't been behind the wheel since.
We call the mines potatoes or toys. There's a potato, don't go there. There's a toy, don't go there. Everyone knows what it's like. They've added more, put them straight into the field. They don't just lay them by hand, they lay them with special vehicles. Straight ahead, it's a vehicle like that. It raises the earth and then rakes it. There are hundreds and hundreds of mines, thousands probably.
Sunflowers, wheat and soy grow near Kadema. Before the war, the farmers would harvest twice as much per season. Do you plant anything in your fields in the occupied territories?
Ambrosia, weeds, what else can you plant there? The grass is like this. You can go down the hillock and look at these fields. There isn't any black farrow.
You said that they asked you to work there?
Yes, the DPR administration asked me to plant and plow there, but all the produce had to remain there. Well, you understand how it is.
You didn't agree?
To go there, I couldn't.
According to the state emergency services, there are still 7,000 square kilometers of mines in Donbas. They have already demined 20,000 hectares since the start of the conflict, but that's just towards the rear. Near the demarcation line, you still have to keep your distance. According to the Geneva International Center of Humanitarian Demining, 1 year of war means 10 years of work for the combat engineers on the territory. However, this is providing that all territory containing mines is marked and mapped. This hasn't happened yet. Meanwhile, according to the OSCE, over the past year, mines and unexploded ordnance erupted on 58 civilians, 16 of whom were killed.